Hey everybody, it's Vanessa, the Crafty Gemini, and welcome to episode number 16 of Fiber Fridays with Crafty Gemini, where I tune in here, we kind of chat together with the chat going on here, whether y'all are asking questions or giving me tips and comments, and I like to share with you all what projects I've been working on, any new acquisitions, new yarn, maybe new gadgets, new tools, and things like that. So today I have maybe like 4 different things that we're going to be chatting about here, so we'll keep this one nice and short. Apologies to everyone who tuned in last week, because we usually do these Fiber Fridays on the first Friday of every month, and we had to push it back till tonight. So let's make sure that all the technology is working. So if you can see me and hear me, let me know in the chat box below. Hey Jamie. Hi Tracy, tuning in from Mississippi. Linda's in the house from Oregon. Pat from Virginia. Great. Thank you, Miss Monique. She says, let's be sure to give Vanessa a thumbs up to show support. So if y'all like these episodes that we do here, whether it's the sewing ones and quilting that I do on my Whip Wednesday live shows or the Fiber Friday ones that we do one Friday a month, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here and maybe not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, definitely click the subscribe button so you'll be in the loop of whatever we post, any new postings of videos and links and stuff to my YouTube channel. Okay, so Janet, she called it. She says, you have the sweater complete. Beautiful. So yes, I am wearing my finished Weekender by Andrea Mowry. The pattern is by Andrea Mowry. The Weekender that I'm wearing is by me. It only took me 3.5 years and a lot of modifications and issues, but I got it done. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this, and I'm going to go into like a little bit of a story time at the end so I can tell you some issues I had, and I'll give you some of my tips. I wrote down 4 different tips that I want to talk about in case y'all venture out to try a pattern. It doesn't have to be this one, but something like this for sweaters, okay? But super comfy, super cute, and I'm glad I bought an extra skein. Let's just leave it at that. Once I finish showing y'all the other couple things that we're going to talk about tonight, then we'll get back to the Weekender sweater so we can finish with that. All right. Hi, Mary Allen. Welcome. She says, first time on the live chat. Welcome. Thank you, Della. She says, gorgeous sweater. Hey, Margie. And Margie says, it's gorgeous. It's super comfy, too. But we'll get into that at the end. So first, let's go ahead and switch over to my over-the-shoulder camera. And I want to share with y'all a project that I made last month. Let me move this, I think, a little bit straighter there. Okay, so this here is my Sophie scarf. So I'm a part of a subscription-based knitting community that my friend Allison runs. And so I tuned in, I think like last month on one day that it popped up like, hey, they're live now. I was doing some work and I was just listening in the background to what they were chatting about. And they had just finished, I think, a knit along for this Sophie scarf. And so a couple of us were tuning in live and we're like, well, I want to make one too. Let's jump in, right? So we just jumped on the bandwagon. We headed over to Ravelry. I purchased the pattern. It's in a different currency, but it ends up coming out to like $4.55 or something like that for the PDF pattern. The pattern designer is Petite Knit. Petite Knits or Petite Knit? I don't know, but the link is in the description box below, and we'll put the link right there for you if you're catching us on Facebook too. It's in the caption, okay? So you can go to Ravelry if you want to check this out. Super cute, easy, but I would not say beginner necessarily, just because you have to keep meticulous count of your rows and repeats and the increases and stuff. But it was super fun to make. You can see how squishy my yarn is. I haven't yet blocked it, but we'll go ahead and put up a picture here of me wearing it so you all can see how it turned out. We went to New Orleans last month, that week between Christmas and New Year's, to visit my husband's family because they're all from New Orleans. And I was like, I tied it around my neck with a little pink sweater, and I'm like, I feel so like French chic, which was perfect for walking in the French Quarter to go to dinner at a restaurant with his family. So I really liked it. I posted it on social media. A lot of you really thought it looked cute. Weirdly so, some people wrote me and were like, ah, I thought it was a snake. I don't know that that really looks like a snake wrapped around my neck, but I guess maybe the stitch definition of the knit scarf made it look like that. But no, not a snake wrapped around my neck, just the scarf. It's super squishy, and surprisingly, although it's pretty thin, if you wear it like that, I know some people tied it twice, and the pattern did come with 2 different sizes. One was even shorter than this, and I was like, I'm gonna go with the large because I need to have some tails there to even grab to tie. I think one was maybe 36 inches long, and I did the large, which finished at about like 41 inches. And I haven't yet blocked this one, so I know that I can still stretch it out a little bit more. And thank you. Glenda says it's so cute. It is, right? At first I was like, come on, like, what are you gonna, this is like a a shoulder strap, right? But then I was like, you know what? It might be exactly what I need. Just a quick, easy project that I can finish in time for that trip. And I did. I really like the way that the yarn that I used ended up striping and pooling in here. Even the first couple of inches that I started, I was like, oh, this is going to be cute. Because I could already see the pattern turning out from the way that it was dyed. And some of you have asked me what yarn I used. Obviously, I don't have it like this because it was the one skein. I still had some left over, but I used, I'm trying to think, pretty much all of it. Maybe I still had like a good little bit left. But it is from Sorella Yarn. I ended up buying, I think it was a 5 or 6 skein collection. This was fall of 2021, I want to say. It was like this witchy collection that she put out. I thought it was super cute. The colors were really fall inspired and really pretty. And this one was called The Witch House. So if any of you have it in your stash, there you can see in garter stitch what it would knit up like. And these were just two other ones that came with the collection. But it's DK weight, and these were all the same. It's on her classic DK base. It's 100% superwash merino wool, and the 100-gram skein has 231 yards in it. So a DK weight, and that's what I ended up using for that super cute Sophie scarf. I have the link to the Ravelry page on where I purchased the PDF pattern for this little scarf in the caption in the Facebook post, as well as the video description box of this video if you are watching us on YouTube. Okay, so Ray is asking, can you show us how to crochet this Sophie scarf? So this is actually a knit pattern, so it's not done in crochet, but it's a pattern by Petite Knit, and it's funny because when I started knitting it, I was like, huh? I was getting like a little bit lost in like the first couple of lines of the stitches, and so I just pulled it out, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 times. And then when I went at it again, I'm like reading each step, like, okay, and then it just took off. So, you know, sometimes if that happens to you and you think, oh, maybe I'm not at the level where I can tackle this, sometimes it's just not clicking in your head. Maybe you have to take a break from the project and then reread it again, or take a step back, because sometimes we assume we know what the next step is and we start doing it. And then when you reference the instructions, you're like, oh, that's not what I was supposed to do. And I think that's what happened to me there. But I was glad that I stuck with it. And I didn't knit on it every day. It took me like a couple weeks to finish, but it was like one day here, skip 3 or 4 days, knit a little bit more. I just had to take meticulous notes. I don't have the printed pattern here, but I was making little hash marks for every single increase section and all that. So I would say more like an intermediate project maybe, but a quick knit for an intermediate knitter, okay? So that's that. Thank you, Audrey. She says, very cute. Thanks, Della. All right, so next I am going to show you, I have 2 new gadgets that I recently purchased. Let's start with this one because I have it right here next to me. So this funky little thing is a 3D printed cone winder. I saw this, so for those of you that don't know, let me make sure I don't trip over these cords. For those of you that don't know, I have a circular sock knitting machine in Erlbacher Gearhart, the metal ones, you know, that are made in the US that we crank on to make socks. Well, when we use that machine, it's recommended that we use yarn that's coming off of a cone, okay? So if it doesn't already come when you bought it on a cone, you can buy these kind of, they're like a sturdy cardboard cone, and you can personally by yourself, either by hand, there's like these little, and I think I've shown this before in a previous episode of Fiber Friday, a little adapter that I can put in with a bit inside my drill, and it will spin so that I can go ahead and wind it on the cone. Basically, you got to figure out a way to get the yarn on here so that then you can use the yarn off the cone, right, to release and come up the mast and all that that we use when we're cranking those socks. Well, next month I'm getting ready to go on my second circular sock cranking circular sock machine knitting retreat. Last year it was in June, and this year it's in February. So I'm getting ready for that, and I have, of course, tons of yarn that I want to get on these cones. I have some that come on cones, but I have some that I want to put on this. So I had been looking for a cone winder, and apparently there's like vintage ones that have been out for a long time. The prices, I've seen some for like $750 for something that's like 2-3 decades old on eBay. I was like, yeah, I'm not buying that. So a lot of companies, I feel like some smaller companies have been working to whip up 3D printed versions that will give us the same results that we need. And so I saw this lady's business on Facebook. The business is called Joyce Knits and Sews, and this is their Speedy Cone Winder. So I bought it, and I was just going to show y'all how it works. You definitely got to practice with it a little bit. So I would not, if you're needing to wind your yarn on a cone like this little top goes screwed in here and it helps keep this in place. That's one of the issues with like using the adapter on the drill, is that it had like a rubber stop that would go inside the cone here. And unless you really pressed it good and kind of went a little bit slow, as it spun around, sometimes it would loosen and pop off. And let me tell you, a hot mess of yarn all over the place, okay? So this one, I think I got these cones from her. They sell them at different places, but I think I ordered this with cones. I can't remember, but I have these from a couple different vendors. So anyways, it has a little slit here where you would put the yarn, tuck a little tail in there and put it through here and then load it up here. So I'm gonna do a bit of a demo on this and just talk about a couple little troubleshooting things that you may wanna consider. So here's the inside. I'm just gonna drop a tail in there. And then I'm going to hold it and slide it in that little slit so that it holds. And I'm going to place it over top here. And I'm going to put the little screw cap back on all the way till it's flush with the top of the cone. Now, the only thing that I have found, whether it's this one or other ones, is that when you're winding the yarn on the cone, at least in my experience, it's a nightmare if you wind too close to this bottom edge or too close to here. Because as it tapers off, yeah, it's gonna stop winding because it has this top on it. But if you take this off, all that yarn that you have, you know, wound onto this narrow tip just falls off and you're gonna have a hot tangled mess. So I've seen people wind it to where they keep the majority of the yarn right here and it looks like a little donut going around and just the bulk of it. Some people try to span it a little bit higher to like about here and here. I'm gonna do a little bit, and if I mess it up, then I'll tell you what I would do in that case. Now the yarn that I'm loading up here, let me grab a ball so I can show you which one it is in case anyone is interested. This is the Laine du Nord yarn. It's painted sock. It says basically that it will give you 2 identical striped socks from here. And so I know I had mentioned this yarn before, and I've been wanting to get it. Laine du Nord. It's made in Italy, but the name is French. I think I've talked about this before on here. Anyway, I want to crank some socks with this at the retreat. So I'm going to wind some of these onto the cones, okay? So that's kind of why I have this set up. Now the ball, if this was a hank like these guys, you could not just unwind this and then think that you're going to go ahead and wind the cone. You're going to tangle up the entire thing. So for those of you that don't know, you would have to undo this first. And this is not sock yarn, but let's say that it was. You would have to undo this like this. Ooh, isn't that pretty? So cute. Then you would have to drape this over a yarn swift. Then you would remove the little thread ties that are in between. And then you would find the ends and start from one end so that you don't end up tangling this whole thing. You could drape it over the backs of a couple chairs to try and keep it open, but whenever you end up buying yarn, whether it's like a skein or a hank, but if it's like this, you can't just like cut all these and just start pulling. This is gonna be, again, a hot tangled mess. Okay, so I'm using this ball here for the demo for y'all because I can start, you know, take off the tag and start working from this because it's already wound into a cake or a ball. So I basically have it, I just threw it on the floor in a box or a basket. And the reason I have it on the floor is so that it's not pulling and putting a lot of tension on the yarn as I'm going to put it up and around the winder here as it starts spinning. So I want it to be kind of further away from me. If you've ever spun before, you know, people sometimes will say they like to set up their lazy cake further away to kind of release some of the drag as they're plying. So that's kind of the same idea. So I have it on the floor so that I have a good bit of slack here before I get to it. Okay. All right. Oh, Ray was asking about your earlier question about whether we could crochet that Sophie scarf. Ray's asking what I meant was, is there a way to convert a knit to crochet project? There's different ways to do it. You're not going to end up with the same stitch type or stitch quality, and it basically is a whole new pattern. So you'd have to work out the math and what stitch you'd like to use to get a similar fabric, but it's 2 totally different things, you know? Okay, so we have this going here. I put that in the little slit, so you see when I tug on, it's not going to slip out yet because it's in there and inside the cone. I have this plugged up. It comes with like a little AC adapter plug. This is on. I'm going to turn it on, and then it has a speed dial knob here. So This is the speed dial, and then on the on and off button, if you press all the way to one direction, it will spin clockwise. If you go the opposite direction, it will go counterclockwise. So I'm just going to press it this way and see which way it goes. Oh, you know what? I don't think I plugged this one in. Did I unplug my things? Whoop, hold on. I don't want my yarn getting tangled with my cord. I'll keep it to this side. We'll do it like this because my cord is right here. So you got to set yourself up so that you don't get everything super tangled. Okay, there, that was off. That's what it was, the speed. So see how slow it's going? Then I can speed it up. And all I'm doing is kind of feeding it with my hand right and left and just kind of keeping a little pace. And I'm trying to stay in that middle range of that cone because like I said earlier, try to stay away from the top tip of it and the bottom. Okay, so right there, I was feeding it, and did you see how it slowed down a little bit? Because I got a little bit more tension, and that's because the ball is tossing around in the box. So what I like to do at that point is just kind of pull myself some slack off of the ball. You can give yourself a bunch, you know, kind of like that. Again, don't do too much because you don't want it to start getting tangled, but I would just do this in bits so that I don't have points on here where the yarn is wound too tightly or too loosely, okay? And just make sure that when you're stopping and starting, that you are turning it on in the same direction. Because remember, if I pressed it on to the opposite side, it would start unwinding all of this instead. Which could be a troubleshooting tip as well. If you mess up at the beginning and you need to unwind it, just hit that. And then you can be winding the yarn back onto a skein or a ball or whatever. So you would just go like that and back and forth until the entire skein or ball or hank or whatever the thing, the put up is that you're using. Whoop, let me stop it because I'm feeling more resistance there. And those couple wraps right there were a little bit tight. That's why I unwound it. I would give myself more slack. This is such a pretty yarn. Look at this. You saw how it started. And remember I said that it's going to give me two identical socks? Well, we've already wound up those teals, pinks, orange, and green on here. And look what is starting to be revealed in here. This is going to be such a pretty striped yarn. So that would be that. I'm going to wind just a little bit more, and then I'm going to set this aside. And do some more right in the middle. I also like to kind of keep it even, the feed, as far as how much of the yarn is and where on the cone. You know, like I said, some people do it where they just wrap right around here. But I feel like then if it sticks out way too much, it's like the outermost ridge of that yarn is really like lax. It's not up against something really snug and tight. But yeah, I'm really liking this yarn. Again, whoop, started to unwind it. I pressed it in the wrong direction. Give myself some more slack and do it like that. Now, if you had it on a yarn swift, the yarn swift is not really going to give you any resistance unless you hit up against a knot, right? And then you see that yarn swift go whoop, and it swings backwards on you. But if you have it on a yarn swift, you can find a nice solid pace and just keep feeding that yarn in, and you wouldn't have to be stopping and going like I am. I just have to stop and go and give myself some slack because I'm doing it from a ball that's in like a box on the ground, right? You can put it in a basket, but even in that instance, if it's tossing itself around in a box, it's still going to take, you know, some pull to get it to flip flop and release more of that yarn. So just be mindful of that. Just stop every minute or so and give yourself a ton of slack, you know, release a bunch of it and then go back and do it again. So this is something that I'm definitely going to do at least with 2 of these balls of yarn that I have for the retreat and see. I always like to do at least 2 because sometimes I mess up the socks, and especially on something like this where it's telling me, you know, you're going to get 2 exact socks where the stripes are. I don't want to mess them up too much, okay? But anyways, again, this was the Speedy Cone Winder by Joyce Knits and Sews, the Speedy Cone Winder. And you can find Joyce, you can't really read it, but it's black on black here. Joyce Knits and Sews on Facebook. She has a page too. Okay, so that was that. We were talking about winding yarn onto cones for circular sock machine knitting. Okay, I did that. Let me get this out the way. Next up is this cute little baby. Oh my gosh. So, if you've been watching Fiber Fridays for a number of months, you probably have seen me do plenty of demos on my EEW my electric eel wheel 6.0, which is another e-spinner, right? That's bigger than this one. This is the teensy one. Now this is the EEW Nano 2. So I got in on the Kickstarter campaign for this, that Maurice Ribble, who is the engineer behind this and the owner of Dreaming Robots. He does Kickstarter campaigns before he puts out these e-spinners. And I got in on the Kickstarter last year sometime. I want to say like May, something like that. But anyways, they just shipped. I got mine last month, I think. And so he sends emails like every step of the way. It's really cool to see like where they are in the process, what have they shipped, the different color options. He runs surveys for all his things. And so they ended up making these in 2 colors, black and this aqua blue. I got the blue color. Do you see the size of this little thing? So obviously you're not going to be doing your production spinning heavy duty tons of yarn on here, but how cute is this for an on-the-go, super portable? The 6.0 is big, but it's still portable. Remember, every time I show y'all it, I have it connected with a battery pack, so I don't even have to have it plugged into the wall. I haven't yet got a little battery pack for this, but it hooks up via USB to a USB charger. It comes with the cord, so I'm going to plug it up because I have power running right here to it. And that's what I'm going to show y'all the little demo of. So it comes with all the stuff you need to plug it up, but I do like to have mine with a battery pack. So I need to order one of those and figure out which size would be the best. Okay, this little guy comes with 4 little suction cups. And if you're using this, you know, on a glass table, on a countertop or something where it will stick, great, right? Because then it's not going to be flopping around, which I think is important when you're working with something that's so lightweight and little. Oftentimes, you know, if you go high speed, you know, things will want to move on you. So those little suction cups are great. But I think when we were going to New Orleans during that trip, I was on Instagram and I saw somebody post about their road trip and they had it like this, flipped, and the suction cups were stuck to the window of the car. And she was like spinning from it like that. I was like, oh my word, people will do anything. I was like, that is a great idea though. That way it's stuck, it's not bouncing around on your lap, it won't stick to the dash. So they put it up on the glass and they were spinning from there. It was, wow. Okay, so you can do that too. You can stick it to the side window or whatever, you know, anything that these little suction cups will stick to. All right. Let's see. Yes, Della says, I love miniature. Isn't that super cute? Look at that teensy little bobbin on there. So it also came with 6 bobbins. It came with 1 that I put on here, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So 6 bobbins. And I think he said on the thing, like everybody gets these same color bobbins. 2 gray, 2 blue, 2 green, whatever. And then it comes, you know, with the user manual, a couple extra little things that you need, and that's it. You tighten the tension here, the take-up tension of, you know, if you start to spin and it's not feeding onto here, I adjust this and make it tighter. And it's like a little thin piece of almost like elastic cording, like elastic thread that we would use in sewing. And it also has still the same little tool that my 6.0 has to bring up, you know, pull the yarn through here to get started, and the 2 little magnetic dots where it holds it steady in place. And you have both positions, Z and S. So you could ply on here. I think he says on the website that each bobbin holds up to 2 ounces of fiber, which is kind of a good bit, right? Of course, it's going to depend whether or not you're able to get close to 2 ounces of fiber on here. It's going to depend on how thick, how bulky the yarn is, you know, whether you're throwing neps and making it like a tweedy yarn. All that kind of stuff is going to affect how much you can fill on here. But man, 2 ounces of yarn is a solid spinning session. So I thought even for this teensy little size, I thought that was pretty good. All right, so I have mine set. The dial here doesn't have numbers like the EEW 6.0 has. It just has notches. So you can kind of count your notches, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mine is right after the 4th notch is where I have the speed on mine set to. And then there's no foot pedal here. You just have an on and off switch. So right here, I would hit it on. It starts. Let me loosen up some of my fiber here because it was already twisted up. And it's pretty quiet. Y'all can probably barely hear that. And so I would just spin a little bit at a time. Then, you know, you want to stop. scoot over the little guides. And then again, similar to how we were just doing, winding the yarn on that cone that you kind of want to go evenly up and down, you want to do the same thing when you're spinning, just so that you don't end up filling one whole chunk here and then have it all uneven. The tension on the yarn will be off and everything. And this will give you an easier way to kind of really fill up that bobbin nice and evenly if you go back and forth. So I would just scoot the guide a little bit further down, not quite that far, and then start again. And man, when I tell you, I am so impressed with this little thing. The suction cups, first of all, are not even stuck down onto the surface that I have here. And I'm not going super slow either. It's not sliding around. And I'm spinning pretty fine. It even has some of the features of the bigger e-spinner, where like this orifice reducer here, if you have this cap on, it makes it so that the opening for you to feed the yarn in is about 1/4 inch opening. You can also remove this and spin some thicker yarns. Obviously, that's going to fill up the bobbin a lot quicker, right? Because it's going to be thicker. But it says that the opening there ends up being like a little bit more than 1/2 inch wide. So I'd be curious to see who is spinning art yarns on this little Nano too. But this thing is so cute. I'm going to see if my daughter even wants to learn. She'll probably say no. She'd rather just make the Rolags and play with the fiber and stuff. But look how cute this little thing is. And you could just sit there quietly, spin, and ply your yarns. So you can see what I put on the bobbin right there. I think it's super cute. Great for on the go. You could put this, I mean, even in the pocket of a tote bag. Like not even its own separate bag, you know? So I'll unplug it. Look how cute. So this, again, you can find this for sale. My friend Vicky doesn't have them for sale on her site because I checked before we went live, but you can buy them directly from the manufacturer, and his website is dreamingrobots.com. All right, so you can get it there if you're interested in that, and it's a really affordable way to kind of get into spinning without having to buy a super expensive, you know, wooden treadle spinning wheel and stuff. Okay. Clovis is asking, does your yarn break when you are spinning? Of course it does. It absolutely does, but because you're spinning the yarn at the same time, you can just stop, reverse them out so you have a little bit more to work with, and you just reattach it. You put it on, and once you hit the button to start, it'll spin it again, and then you can just start right back up. It's the same way as if you were mixing. So say you wanted to weigh out 4 or 5 little bundles of different colors of like 1/2 ounce each. You could spin one color, that full 1/2 ounce, then grab a second color, and when you got to the end of the first color, the same way as if the roving would have broken on you, you would attach them the same way. Yeah, they just spin together and they keep going, just like adding any other color. Yeah, so Nancy's asking, would you recommend this for a beginner spinner? I actually would. A lot of people will tell you, like, when you first start, use a drop spindle. I started with a drop spindle, and when I bought my treadle wheel, I didn't know anything about spinning, and I was like, why do people tell you to start with a drop spindle? I much rather have started with the treadle wheel like I did, you know, that I ended up getting after. But it's because I'm very tactile and I like to involve all parts of my body when I'm doing something. So like if I'm treadling and using my hands, I can more easily get into the zone. Whereas the drop spindle felt like it was so detached from my body, like, oh, it's spinning, and give it a twirl, but it's like dangling in space and gravity. That was not for me. But this here, because you are removing the part of having to, oh, look, it did stick. Those little suction things did stick if I pressed down on it, I guess. Because this doesn't have a foot pedal, right, like a proper treadle that you need to be pressing, I think for a beginner, at least in the way that I think and how I would like to teach, would be it allows you to kind of really focus on the feeding and the getting the feel for the fiber and the fiber length, like realizing, okay, if you're working with a fiber that is, you know, 4-inch staple length, then you can't just be pulling and thinking that the fiber, that fiber piece is going to keep going. You got to keep in mind, like, okay, I need to stop before I get to about 4 inches because it's going to just pull the fluff away from me and you're not going to have any more to keep feeding. So in other words, let me show you with this. I don't even know what this is. I want to say maybe it's dyed Corriedale. So if I pull some out, it stops pulling where it wants to, right? Because that is the length of the fiber of this breed of sheep. So this, maybe that's not the full amount, but oh yeah, it is. You see how when I tug on it, it doesn't separate? That means that is one piece of fiber from that sheep. And this is 6 inches in length. So they usually will tell beginners, like, start with a fiber that has a longer staple length because it's not getting away from you. When you're working with something that has like a 1-2 inch staple length, it's like you pull, you draft a little bit and it goes away from you because it's not long enough for you to get into the zone. And so for a beginner, starting with a longer staple length like this and removing that treadle, the stepping of the treadle, and trying to, like, you know how they say, like, rub your belly and pat your head at the same time. It's that kind of a thing that you need to get used to. At least that's how it felt for me when I was both spinning and treadling at the same time. So for a lot of people, it might be easier to get into spinning by doing something like this, where you're removing the feet completely and just focused on, you know, drafting and just working with the fiber up here. Okay. Yes, Vicky says spin the singles on the Nano and then ply on the 6.0. That's what I need to do, and I have it in a box. I'm about to send it to you. And oh, Donnie's asking, what do you use the bobbins for? Well, you need the bobbins so that you can wind up the singles that you're spinning. So when you take the fluff and you spin it into a tighter little bit of 1-ply yarn, it needs to be loading onto something in order to keep that tension and that twist on it. So that's what the bobbins are for. So when this one is full, then I will go in and put another one together, take this one out, right? And then make myself another bobbin. So this is how they would work. You just screw them in like that to the ends. Just kidding, this way. And so that's it. And then you make your next bobbin, and then that would go there, so that you could keep spinning more and more yarn. Otherwise, it would be a nightmare if you only had one bobbin, and this doesn't just go for this little e-spinner, on any wheel. If you spin and you fill up a bobbin, you can't spin no more. You need more bobbins, right? Because then once that's spun, then you're like, okay, now what do I got to do? Either you're going to ply it back onto itself. You got to do something with that fiber, like with the, you know, the singles that you spun onto that bobbin, to get them off of there, so that then you can have that free bobbin. So you always need extra bobbins, okay? Oh, yes. Hi, Annie B. She says she's bringing her EEW to hot socks. I'm bringing mine too. Well, this one probably, since I didn't end up, well, I did. I spun a whole bat last time we were there last year, didn't I? That was super fun. Are you going to sit next to me this time too? Yay! I can't wait to see my fiber friends. We're going to be making socks all weekend at that retreat. All right. So that was that. And now we can talk about my weekender sweaters. So let's put them on my front shot here. Hello, everybody. So here's what I have that I wanted to just talk about for the weekender. Because first of all, I bought the yarn. The yarn is DK weight, and I bought it from an indie dyer called Night Owl Fibers. She's from Texas. I bought it at the Houston Fiber Fest. I did, when I went to visit my friend Stacy. 2019, you said that was, or 2018? Yeah, I think it was 2019 or 2018. I don't know, but it was one of those years. It was like 3.5 years ago. And she had this colorway in DK, and she only had 5 skeins. My friend Stacy and I had calculated the math, because the weekender sweater is the one that I had used, that I was planning to base this sweater off of, called for worsted weight. So if you know, worsted weight is a classified 4 yarn, so it's a little bit thicker and plumper than number 3, which is DK. So when you are substituting a totally different weight of yarn for a pattern that calls for something else, you're going to have to work out the math. You can't just say, oh, this is for bulky weight. I like this sport weight. Let me just make it. It ain't going to turn out, okay? Because you're not making the same fabric that you're supposed to be making based on what the designer created. The same thing, it's like if you sew, it's like if you're making a jacket that calls for like a double knit that has some structure, some body, and it's thick, and you find a chiffon and you're like, I'm going to make the jacket in this really lightweight chiffon. Well, it's not going to look like the original pattern intended it to be, right? Because those two fabrics are absolutely different. One is super thin, practically see-through, and super drapey, and the other one is thicker, heftier, warmer, and has a lot more shape and structure. So it's the same thing. We're creating the fabric when we knit or crochet the garments, so you have to think about how the yarn that you're selecting is going to turn, like what type of fabric the yarn you're selecting is going to make, in other words, okay? So I decided I wanted to use this DK yarn on the weekender that was designed for worsted. So I did knit up a gauge swatch, but I did not make a gauge swatch that I then cut and kept the swatch. I knit up a gauge swatch just to make sure that my measurements were coming out the same with the needles I was using. And then I thought, okay, this fabric that I've created now, I can follow this pattern and it will turn out close enough. Okay? Well, she only had 5 skeins. And when we worked out the math, it was like I was only going to need 4 skeins, but I was going to barely have any. And now this is like an independent dyer girl that I don't know when I'm ever going to see her again. And she only had 5 skeins, so I don't even know if she's going to re-dye it, right? So I just bought all 5 skeins. And boy, am I glad I did. A lot of knitters will tell you, buy the extra skein, you never know. And we know the skeins are not cheap, but I bought the extra skein, my friends, and this is all I have left over. And that's because of the modifications I made. Okay, if you look at the schematic on your patterns, and usually, you know, the really good designers and stuff, they'll have a schematic, which is just like a drawing, and it will have the different components of the garment, and it will tell you like the neck opening, it measures this, the sleeve opening, or excuse me, the sleeve length measures this, from the back to the bottom hem measures this, right? The bust circumference measures this. And so that is a great way for you to use that as a guide to help you select the size that you're going to be making and any modifications that you might need to do. So for example, the size that I ended up making was way smaller than like my regular size because the pattern includes so much ease. So I think Andrea says in here that it's like designed to have like 10 inches or something wild of ease. And so for those of you that don't sew clothes or know what ease is the difference between your actual body measurement and the garment itself. So if the garment says it's designed to have 10 inches of ease around the bust, let's say, not that this one, I think this just has 10 inches of ease all around, but say it says 10 inches of ease around the bust. That means that if you have a 42-inch bust, the garment is going to finish at 52 inches. And if you don't wear big baggy sweaters like that, you're probably not going to want to pick what your size would normally be. So for me, I ended up picking like size 3 so that it wasn't going to be that much bigger on me. And I picked the one that had a finished bust size of like 48.5. So I could still wear this with a bulky kind of like long sleeve sweatshirt under, not sweatshirt, but like a sweater if it's really cold, you know, like a long sleeve shirt under. I can wear it with lighter weight t-shirts. So it is roomy, okay? But I didn't do it with 10 inches of ease. That would be way too much for me, and I would have needed 10 skeins. Probably. It was like I'm just using exactly what I had. Another change I had to make was in the arm circumference. So although this pattern is supposed to fit like with all this ease, I find that the arm circumference was super small for what the space was here. So for example, the upper sleeve circumference of the size I was making, if I was just following size 3 and made the sweater all the way through, I would not have been able to put my arms in it. Right? It would have still fit me like loose around here, but I wouldn't have been able to put my arms because the circumference was 13.25 inches. And I have 16.5-inch biceps. There's no way, right? So I had to increase the circumference here of the sleeve, and that's why you can kind of see it's like a little bit, and I haven't blocked this yet, but you can kind of see that it's a little bit sticks out almost like right here where I picked up the stitches, because I had to pick up a lot more stitches in order to make that circumference bigger and big enough to still be loose on me. You see how much room I have? Plus it's a superwash wool, so it's nice and stretchy. And when I block it, I can kind of, you know, make it stretch a little bit more if I need it to. But I feel like right here where it is fine, because I do have a t-shirt underneath and it's not tight or anything. Let me see, what were the other ones? So my tips were buy the extra skein. If you can swing the cost, buy the extra skein. Yep, I talked about making the swatch, use the schematic, and picking up the extra stitches. So you see, even with doing a gauge swatch and buying a 5th extra skein, I only ended up with this much yarn. I mean, you can ask my husband. As he was driving, I'm finishing the 2nd sleeve, and I'm looking at the little bundle like, it's not going to be enough. What am I going to do if I have 3/4 of a sleeve and not the other one, you know? So I also skimped a little on my sleeves, because when I was finishing the 1st sleeve, that's kind of going to set the tone for the 2nd one, right? You need to make it match. So I was like, I'm not going to go extra long on this one because I might not have enough yarn. And when I tell you I got to the end and was doing the tubular bind off, and all I was seeing was basically smoke in my project bag, I was freaking out, but I'm so glad. Look at that little bit. that I bought that extra skein. Okay. So again, this pattern is called The Weekender by Andrea Mowry. I have a link to her Ravelry page where you can get the pattern. And I think originally, don't quote me, but I think originally when she released The Weekender, it was for a fingering weight, like sock weight thin yarn. And then maybe people requested it be thicker and she made a worsted version. So I ended up buying the pattern for the worsted because that's closer in weight to the DK weight that I used. But it's super cute. It has a faux seam going down the center front and the center back. The ribbed hem, it's a little split hem on the side. I think it's so, so cute. I'm really happy I made it. And dare I say that I am thinking about maybe casting on another one? I'm not sure. But I think because I used DK weight and I took all my notes, the size needles that I used, how many stitches and all that I picked up and everything, I may just make it again in DK. Because I still had to make that bicep, you know, the arm modification here. But super fun and cute. And a lot of people will say this is a great beginner project. It is if you have someone to help you because there's a lot of stuff going on right here that short rows stuff, I don't even remember. You know, I've spanned this project over 3.5 years. So I feel like there were short rows and like you had to resolve stitches and I was like, what is this? Even with the tutorials I watched, I couldn't help it. So I did have to get a knitting expert friend of mine to help me resolve those stitches. And then I was like, oh, and now I can do the rest. So yes. Gina's asking, so does using DK yarn make it a lighter and not as warm sweater? I have problems with overheating. I think so, but you know what that's also going to be based on is the size of the needles that you use. So remember I was talking about the fabric that we make when we crochet or knit a garment is kind of like when we sew, we pick the fabric that's already made, right, to match the pattern and what it's calling for and how we want the fabric to drape. Well, when we knit and crochet, we're making the fabric at the same time. And so it's not just the yarn that you use, but it's also that combination of the yarn you use, how thick or fluffy it is, plus the needle size or hook size that you use. So if I would have used a larger needle, I would have ended up with a looser, more drapier fabric for my sweater, which that would help because you'd have a lot more airflow. My fabric is not super dense. It's still pretty airy, like I can see through. Like if I just pull it like that, I can see through it. So for me, I think this is just the right weight. It is 100% wool, so it's gonna keep you warm, but I don't feel like the fabric is like an arm or like those really, you know, when you knit super tight that is just thick and you can't get any airflow in there, this is not for that. And it is drapier, I feel like. Okay. Thank you, Annette. She says, I love the finished sweater. Awesome. Yay. EJ says, I have this pattern and now I want to knit it. Let's do it. Go for it, EJ. Definitely post pictures. And if you're in my Facebook group, it's called Yarn and is that what it's called? Yarn and Fiber with Crafty Gemini. Go ahead and you can post pictures of the yarn that you want to use. Ask people like, which one do y'all think I should use? Let's get a little conversation going over there for any projects that y'all are working on for knitting or crochet. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'm glad that y'all tuned in, even though we scooted this over 1 week. If you want to be kept in the loop of future Fiber Fridays and any of our knit alongs and crochet alongs and things, we have a link for you to join our free email list that is specifically fiber related. That can be found in the video description box of this video as well as the Facebook caption if you're watching us on Facebook. So check us out there, join the email list so you can stay in the loop of all the Crafty Gemini and Fiber happenings. Hope you all have a great weekend, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.